Hello everyone, you're watching RAM24.com channel, and today we will be taking apart the Huawei Nova 11i. First, as usual, we need to remove the SIM card tray. We use a SIM eject tool, insert it into the hole and carefully push the tray out. Then set it aside. Next, we need to heat the surface of the back cover to about 70 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit. We use a heating mat for this, but you can also use a heat gun or a hair dryer. And after about 10 minutes, we can move on to removing or separating the back cover. For this we use a thin plastic film inserted into the gap between the back cover and the mid frame and carefully slide it along the edge, cutting through the adhesive. As always, be careful around the camera area, so you don't accidentally touch or damage the lenses. Also keep in mind that this area is usually reinforced with extra adhesive. We should also be careful around the side buttons area, since there may be flex cables located there. Now we run the tool again around the camera area and try to separate the cover. In our case, the cover was glued on, most likely with sealant or some kind of adhesive. The phone had been disassembled before. Now we carefully try to lift the cover. And we remove the back cover. You can see the area where it was additionally glued, clearly not factory adhesive. After that, it is best to cover the camera lenses. We use a special protective film. Please note that the film should be applied not directly onto the lenses, but onto the rim around them. Next, we move on to removing the screws in the top section. For this, we use a 1.5mm Phillips screwdriver, or Phillips #30. All the screws appear to be the same, but it is still better to place them on maybe a magnetic mat in a specific order, since screws don't always go back well into different holes during reassembly. And then we need to remove the top cover. It is best to use a non-metal tool to avoid accidentally shorting anything on the motherboard. We carefully pry it up from the edge and disconnect it. In our case, the cover is additionally glued in the top section. Carefully lift it, gently wiggle it, don't rush and don't use force, so you don't damage anything during removal. And we set the cover aside. After that, using a non-metal tool, disconnect the battery connector and move on to the lower section. In the lower section, we also need to remove the screws using the same 1.5mm Phillips screwdriver. It is better to keep these screws separate from the previous ones. Then we need to remove the cover, most likely with a loudspeaker. We find the correct spot where we can pry it up. Of course, in modern Samsung smartphones, this is implemented much more simply and conveniently. There is usually a marked spot where you can easily pry the cover off. Here it is not quite as straightforward. Okay, we carefully pry it up, lift it and remove the cover with a speaker and set it aside. Next we disconnect the coaxial cable connector. Disconnect the second coaxial cable connector and free the coaxial cable from its retaining clips. And then disconnect the interconnect flex cable. Now we can remove the subboard, pry it up from the edge and try to lift it. Check where it is still held in place, most likely by clips. And we carefully remove the subboard. The subboard contains the charging port, microphone and other components on the reverse side. Now for our traditional quick test of the microphone hole. The microphone opening is located in the display frame and has an L-shaped channel. On the inside it is protected by a special membrane. The microphone itself is located on the subboard from the reverse side. If you insert something into the microphone hole, you won't be able to damage the microphone this way. By the way, please note that the subboard shows signs of liquid damage, and most likely the liquid entered through the charging port opening. The vibration motor remains in the display frame. Now we move on to the motherboard. On the motherboard we disconnect the rear cameras, carefully pry them up, remove them and set them aside. Then we disconnect the front camera. It is best to cover the front camera lens with protective film to prevent dust or debris from getting on it. After that we disconnect the two coaxial cable connectors and move the cables aside so they don't get in the way. Then disconnect the interconnect flex cable, the display flex cable and the flex cable for the side buttons, possibly including the fingerprint sensor. Next we need to remove one screw that holds the motherboard in place. This screw is different from the others. Now we can remove the motherboard, carefully pry it up from the edge. Also, please note that the motherboard may also be held in place with thermal paste on the reverse side. And remove any flex cables out of the way and remove the motherboard, then set it aside. Finally, we move on to remove the battery. As is typical for Huawei devices, there are 3 brown pull tabs labeled 1, 2 and 3. The tabs on the sides need to be folded back and the center tab should be carefully pulled upward. So we remove the battery. Under the battery there is a transparent adhesive protective layer that shields the interconnect flex cables. And that completes the disassembly. Thank you for watching and see you in our next video, either on our Telegram channel or on our website.